and that Councillor Vodden is not here tonight. I think we will have a moment's silence in honor of his wife, Janice, that her funeral was today. Okay, but move to 1.1 that I really don't like the idea of. There's a suggested motion. Does one of the councillors want to speak on it? Councillor Sutton.
I would regretfully move that we hereby accept with regret the resignation of Richard Al, the clerk and manager of IT, effective July 20th.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hallahan?
We can vote against.
No, you can. I'm not sure it matters.
And I follow those sentiments. All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, confirmation of the agenda. Do I have a mover? Deputy Reeve Campbell, Councillor Hallahan. All in favor? Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, if any. None noted. Okay, moving to the consent agenda. Is there points to be brought forward? Councillor Hallahan.
6.4.3. Dan. Right. Yeah.
So the consent is
The consent just goes
Oh, okay, all right. If I don't have a
up to the
question,
end of 4.
my question will be when we get to the.
Okay. If council is in agreement with the consent items, do I have a mover for the motion for them all? Deputy Reeve Campbell, Councillor Ritzman Taninga. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Point 5 is public meetings or hearings. We don't have any. So we're into 6 for reports. From the Clerk's Department, 6.1.1 is a consent application report. Laura, can you take us through what's going on there?
Thank you. Okay, good evening, Council and Reeve. So tonight I will be discussing 2 severance applications, consent C38 and C39-2018. Both of these consents are on properties adjacent to each other, so they're being considered at the same time, as ultimately they both need to succeed to create the outcome of the new proposed lots. So the properties are at 39705 and 39791 on Belgrave Road in East Wawanosh, and the applicant was Scott Patterson of Lebrecht and Patterson and Associates Incorporated, with the owner Skilder Organics Limited. You can see here on the aerial photograph the 2 subject properties. For file C38-18, it's outlined in red there, and that's the west farm, that is the subject property, and C39-18 is outlined in blue. So the purpose of these 2 properties is to sever, the 2 applications is to sever the 2 existing farms into multiple parcels and ultimately create 3 parcels of farm through the severing and merging of the farmland. During the circulation of this application, no comments were received from members of the public. Comments received from the Huron County Public Works Department, because Belgrade Road would be the approval authority for any entrance permits. They had no concerns for the proposed severances or the applications, and as the applicant was requesting to maintain the 2 existing entrances that come off of Belgrade Road currently, and would add in a circular driveway, not requiring a middle entrance. They did note that should a future access be requested for the middle farm, they would not see an issue with granting an entrance permit in the future. Comments received from the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority identified that there is regulated land on the property at the rear, and the subject lands do contain river valley. But they did note there's sufficient room on each of the proposed lots, once broken into 3, to locate any future development outside of their regulated area, and they had no concerns. So you can see on this kind of color coordinated photo, the proposed severance. So the red outlined subject property of C38-18 is proposed to have the green section, that is the proposed severed lands. The 2 remaining on the east and the west would be the retained lands. The L-shaped parcel would be Farm 1, which would remain its own 38-hectare farm and contain a barn that's currently under construction, some sheds, grain bin, and a residence. The middle section, the severed lands that's in green, would be vacant, as well as the next east smaller portion, which is being proposed to merge with the retained lands on the next farm over. So in the blue, the retained land, the severed lands would be the orange, and ultimately the orange and the green would merge together to form a middle lot with kind of zigzag lot lines that allows farm access to the rear field. The front would be the retained and merge as indicated by the yellow arrow. So the yellow arrow showing the 2 retained pieces that are going to merge together to create one new farm. The orange and green would merge together from the white arrow and form a new farm, and the remaining L piece would be the 3rd farm by itself. Ultimately, this is what it would look like. So the green, blue, or purple in the middle, and then red shows the 3 new farms, with the yellow showing the proposed driveway that would ultimately cross all of the farms using the 2 existing accesses onto Belgrave Road. So the purpose of creating these 3 new farms would be to have 3 farms that do satisfy the North Huron official plan minimum lot size for creating a new agricultural parcel, as well as allow livestock barn development on each of the farms. The one thing against the policies was that it did satisfy the agricultural policies for land division, and that the proposed operation is an agricultural operation with the intended long-term use to be a viable farm, and does satisfy the minimum lot size of 38 hectares for each farm. And also under consideration is that an agricultural severance application is subject to the applicable minimum distance separation. So currently a livestock barn under construction on what is shown here is Farm 1, and the minimum distance separation was calculated for both Farm 2, the middle farm, and Farm 3 outlined in red, and found that there is an area suitable on each of the farms for a future livestock barn while maintaining a distance to surrounding houses and the area of Belgrade. So it does meet the policies there. As well, each farm is zoned natural environment limited protection as well as general agriculture. So the general agricultural use is appropriate. That's being proposed, and the natural environment would not change as a result of this application, or both of these applications. All of the frontages for all 3 farms do meet the minimum frontage for access to a road. So that was reviewed as well. So here's some site photos. This was taken standing on Belgrave Road of Farm 1 with the new barn under construction, the existing structures, and the single dwelling house. You can see this is the barn that's currently under construction on that farm. And this is showing the rear of the property through where the river valley is and the workable acres. This is currently what is other subject property just east on Belgrave Road and would ultimately be Farm 3. And it is recommended that both of these applications, C38 and C39-18, are recommended for approval with the conditions, which are pretty standard for severances. An agricultural severance, that they drainage act is checked, the survey is done, and most importantly, that it outlines the merging of the land so that ultimately the 3 farms are created that all have their own road access and frontage and are all meeting the minimum lot size.
Okay. Council questions? Deputy Reeve?
The new barn that's gone up, is it within the MDS of the blue line on the map? Like how, I don't know how close, with putting a new barn up, how close it is up there. It'll be up in the top one there, and the green is where the new barn has gone on. And there's a new barn that's gone in. Does it meet the MDS standards for what we're doing?
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, Councillor Hallahan moves, Deputy Reeve Campbell seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Okay, that's the first motion. Okay, and you want to do that, Richard?
So that was, that particular motion was for the consent application file C3818. So there is also the, as Laura mentioned, the second application C3918 that would.
Councillor Syke
I'll move
moves.
that.
Okay, Deputy Reeve Campbell. Any questions? All in favor of the motion? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Moving to the Finance Department, 6.2.1, the insurance RFP. Donna, do you want to fill in a little bit more on that?
Sure, thank you. So it's been 7 years since we conducted our last insurance RFP, and we usually plan for every 5 years, but we were delayed a couple of years by the time we entered into shared services. The insurance RFP is a complicated process, but at the outset, I was confident that in the 4 major providers of municipal insurance, I felt confident that if any one of those would provide us with our coverage as we needed, and I was hoping that all 4 would participate in the process, and we were fortunate that all 4 did respond to our RFP. All the companies had good references and good ratings, all offered value-added services such as training and workshops and seminars for our staff. And as you can see, there was very little difference in the pricing of the bottom 2 companies that submitted proposals. So as I worked my way through all of the requirements that we asked for, and I compared all 4 of the proponents' proposals, and it turned out that AON had the what I felt was the most comprehensive program at the and response to our RFP at the best price as well. So as I said, we checked the references and went through all of the requirements that we currently have, and felt that in speaking with the other municipalities that have AON as their insurance provider, that we too will be satisfied by going with that company.
Councillor Syke?
Through you, Reeve, to Donna. Donna, this is an actual, from the looks of it, even our existing holder today, there was a substantial decrease in what their proposal was compared to what we're paying. Is that because of shared services? That was our original. What's the reasoning behind that?
No, the insurance market has changed at this time. As you know, years ago after 9/11 and some of those tragic events and some of the higher awards that were being awarded through the court costs, we all saw insurance creeping up through those years. But I feel that the insurance market has settled at this time, and any municipalities that are putting their insurance out are seeing some substantial reductions in premiums to what they were already paying, no matter what company they were with. So I believe it's a settling of the market to some extent.
Deputy Reeve?
That's just my question was, we paid them $50,000 more than what their bid has come in on. Last year's.
Councillor Syke?
So yes, supplemental. So I guess my question is has the market settled because we've asked for the RFP, or has the market settled because we didn't ask them for the RFP a year ago? Like, that ultimately is my question. I'm not questioning you specifically. It's a comment because, the insurance, yes, I agree that the insurance has settled, but the problem is, and we even find this in consumer, my insurance is, you seem to not get the question unless you start asking and saying, well, by the way, I'm going to go and look it down the street and see what their rate is. So I guess my question is that, and again, it's more of a comment, not for you, but should we even be considering doing an RFP process more frequently than 5 years based on the understanding of what we've seen here tonight? Like, I understand our goal is 5, but my conversation is the market could shift exactly the opposite way in 5 years, and we could be seeing that 50,000 go the other way again. So I'm wondering if we need to get a better sense, more timely information. And I know the length of time it takes to do an RFP is a rigorous. So I'm not suggesting this out of turn, but $50,000 is a big savings, and I'm happy to see it. No, but I just don't want to find out in 3 years that we're going to get a $50,000. Oops, I've made a mistake, or we've got an adjustment that we have somehow need to make, and then we've got to worry about that problem. So I think that would be just a comment for council to decide whether 5-year RFP process is the right time, or is this certain thing, like, because of the fluctuation in insurance, is this something that we could possibly look at every 3 years?
Oh, certainly, and that's the type of thing is what we do is we talk to other municipalities, because everybody's going out at different times. And so I've checked with different ones to see what their results were, and any of the recent ones are seeing pretty significant savings, the same as we are. But a couple of years ago, those savings weren't available. So we're fortunate at this point that savings are available. And as I said, other municipalities are seeing somewhat the same range of variations.
Okay.
Just the one other thing, that the fact that other municipalities are seeing the same, is there any sense that we could do the similar, what we do with procurement of other services and supplies with other municipalities, where we could mirror up our renewal periods, where we can go in and say, here you go, insurance company, you have the ability to look at 3 municipalities all at one. What's your best price? My question is there a market for that, where if it not us change our renewal period, maybe a discussion with the other municipalities to see if we can kind of get synergy on our renewal period, so we could potentially ask that question. Maybe there isn't any savings there, but I would hate to not have any. The economies of scale may tip the other direction, where they could get that benefit as well.
Donna.
Some of the counties have actually undertaken the process and allowed the lower tiers to be participants in that process. So that has been done in some of the neighboring counties as well. So it is definitely something to look into for the future, to see if we could have a county-wide RFP on insurance, for sure.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, there is a suggested motion, and also and further that the cyber breach response option be accepted and added to the township insurance coverage. Do I have a mover? Councillor Sype. Councillor Ritzman-Taninga. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Donna. Moving to Public Works, 6.4.1, the screener procurement. I'll let Sean give a bit of background on it.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. As the report mentions, the Public Works Department uses approximately 220 cubic meters of screen topsoil annually. This is used for a variety of tasks through the municipalities. Anything from work in ditches to clean up after tree stumps removed, winter cleanup, that sort of thing. So it's used all over the place. It's used by a number of different areas of the department, not the least of which is the cemetery as well. So basically, we have a unit that failed us and failed miserably. It's in fairly poor shape. I think we got a fairly good service run out of it. And the decision was made to go to tender to see what was out there. As you can see in the price breakdown, CM Precision provided a very good price for a fairly small portable unit. It uses half-inch grading. We can, on request, get different grates put in it for different qualities or grades of topsoil. Output of the unit is rated at 30 plus cubic yards an hour, so, but I don't think we need anything that big. The important thing was this unit is portable. So if we're doing work, our current practice, we tram everything to the lot behind the cemetery, we do all our screening, then we take the material back to where we're using it. If we have any kind of a bigger job going on, we can actually move this unit over. And the thinking is that we would definitely eliminate some transport cost that's associated with it. So basically, outside of that, as I mentioned, this was not something that we budgeted as a capital item. It's in response to a breakdown. The funds are available in operating because I'm going to be basically portioning out the unit, if approved, to the various cost centers that we would use at the cemetery, roadside, winter control, that sort of thing.
Councillor Site.
Sean, I understand the need, or what the requirement is. The concern I have is that the actual cost to just buy topsoil is cheaper than buying the unit. So is the ability to get the topsoil when needed an issue? Like what, I guess my question is that there really isn't if we can buy the topsoil cheaper than having the equipment, then why would we have the equipment is my question.
Thank you. Through your, basically, the expectation is there's a 2-year warranty on the unit. We would expect quite a bit more service out of it because it's a very simple machine. So yes, in year 1, we're looking at about $4,800 a year. If we're able to keep this thing in service for 2, 3, 4 years, we've got a fairly notable return on investment because we're able to basically collect lower grade soils through the various jobs. So in year 1, yes, absolutely, it would be cheaper, but by the end of year 2, we're ahead financially.
So you're saying the actual requirement of the cubic meters isn't going to be 220 every year. It could go from 220 to 500, 1,000, whatever. Is that what you're telling me?
Could go less 1 year, more the next, but the average seems to be approximately 220 per year. So by the time you look at 2 years worth of purchase, you're looking at what, $9,600. So at the end of year 2, at the end of the warranty period, we're actually ahead.
Okay.
Councillor Hallahan. Deputy Reeve. Second. Any further discussion?
Just a comment, it is hard to get good, clean topsoil. I was trying to have some this spring, and I thought I had a good load, but it was a pile of junk.
And it only gets more expensive every year.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, 6.4.2, the development standard relief request, and I'll let Sean take that as well.
Yes, thank you, Vincent. So at the last council meeting, GJAJ Holdings submitted a letter requesting relief from certain municipal development standards with regard to the proposed development of Blythe. And so if I can, I'll just basically we've had some consultation with Bruce Potter from BN Ross, of course, as well as staff. So we've spent a fair bit of time looking at this. if it pleases council, I'll basically just address each of the items through the course of the report. So section 3.1 roads, the request was that the road be constructed instead of the 8.5 meters in the development standard, that it uses an asphalt width of 8 meters. Now, staff has reviewed this, had quite a bit of discussion with BM Ross, and given the nature of the subdivision and the traffic, the anticipated traffic, it seems reasonable. That road width still permits 2 lanes of traffic and 1 lane of permissible parking, so we didn't have a problem with the request. The second request had to do with road subdrains. The request was that we allow them not to install subdrains originally, and then their engineers came back and suggested that subdrains on the roads be used anywhere where the road grade is less than 2%. But if the road grade is greater than 2%, that they strictly provide stubs upstream of the area, upstream and downstream. And after discussion and a review of the geotechnical report, we found that that was an acceptable request. Section 3.6, concrete curb and gutter of cross-section approved by the municipal engineer shall be provided along the edges and paved roadway surfaces. And this really ties into the discussion and conversation that was presented by Bruce at the last council meeting, Mr. Potter. Basically, staff's recommendation is that the curb and gutter do serve an essential, as an essential component of the road cross-section, and as such, we would recommend that we maintain that requirement. Now, the developer did contact me and has withdrawn his request for the sidewalk exemption from sidewalk. I think he heard very clearly from council that sidewalk on one side was an important asset or feature to the road cross section. The next request had to do with private drain connections. The developer was proposing not to install storm service laterals to each lot and instead just have sump pumps discharged to the surface. Staff agreed, providing that the sump pump discharges were all sent to the rear of the property. And the reason for that is we didn't want sump water flow impacting sidewalk and road so that we have freeze thaw problems. Lot grading and design, we didn't have any concern with the proposed rear swale or the spacing between the outlets. And basically, that was the sum total of the report as far as staff was concerned.
Okay. Deputy Reeve.
Through you to Sean, so this has been presented to the contractor.
By way of the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hallahan.
So, to Sean, so the only thing that we haven't relieved it really on is the curb and gutter.
I think through you, Reeve, I think that was the big
Yeah.
one, was the curb and gutter.
Okay.
Councillor Singh.
I will move the recommendations as presented in the report.
Okay, Councillor Hallahan seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay. And 6.4.3, there's the House and Dam delegation summary, funding analysis and action plan. Sean?
Thank you, Reeve. Basically, the report before council today does a couple of things. First and foremost, it is in response to the recommendations or the resolution that was passed at the last 2 meetings ago. And basically, you'll see in the report, we went through the tape and tried to capture everybody's comments, all of the delegation's comments with as much accuracy as possible. The other component that this report specifically speaks to is the recommendation that there was some financial information be brought forward. So you'll see that in the report, and if it pleases council, I'll kind of try to encapsulate the intent of the whole report through a couple of comments. Basically, I think it's fairly understood and agreed upon that the housing dam's reached a point now where, because of its current condition, it is a risk and a liability to the municipality, and I think that it needs to be addressed. Regardless of the options that council looks at through, and some of the options we discussed were presented through the KGS report, and we've had some opportunity to talk through them. Regardless of any of those options, we will need, in all probability, to pursue some form of external funding source. And as we start to talk about that, it is important, I think, at this point to point out the fact that the housing dam is a North Huron asset. It's not area rated. So when we speak about funding, it has to be borne in mind that this is a North Huron asset. So any of these funding models, any costs that are associated will have impact on the whole of the residents in North Huron. Basically, to try to get some decent workable numbers, Donna was very helpful in approaching some of her contacts at Infrastructure Ontario. We talked about what we were looking to do. In everybody's packages, there's a number of different funding scenarios that are laid out. It's fairly extensive document. And basically what I did is looked at all of the options, save for the removal option, which was under 500,000. And they put together the cost for that. They used a 30-year amortization period because that's as far out as Infrastructure Ontario would permit the municipality to borrow. If we were going to go beyond 30 years, that starts bringing other external funding sources in to try to achieve it. So anyways, that's, and you can see the numbers are, the principal and interest for the four options are indicated under financial impact in the report, and then in great detail in the attachment it shows the annual payments, the semi-annual payments that are required. Basically, the repair option, there was two that were put in front of us by KGS. The pinning the pinning of the existing structure came in at $4,383,426. Principal and interest. So that's looking at the end of the 30 years. That's what we would take. If we were simply to look at additional mass, that cost came in at the $6,999,104. Principal and interest after 30 years. Replacement 2 was the replacement piece. The earthen embankment type, which was basically an additional sluice sway with an earthen embankment across to handle the flow, came in at $6,050,000 to $50,319, and a full width overflow weir came in at, and that's of course the higher end type of a strictly a weir across the top, so it really moves according to it handles anything that's thrown out. That came in at $9,486,473. So basically, we're at the point, or I think council's at the point where we need to consider what options are available to us. In the simplest terms, we have rehabilitation to bring it back to its original state. We have replacement or we have removal. It's important to note that if the decision was made to preserve the dam, that doesn't necessarily mean it will be in its current form. And basically, if everyone were to look at this kind of very simple decision-making flow chart, basically the top question is to preserve the housing dam. If the decision on that is no, basically now you're talking about removal. That puts a number of processes in. We procure the services of an engineering firm, and then we start looking at the permitting processes for the removal and the restoration of the park area. So that one moves in a fairly straightforward sense. The other's a little more important that we'll talk about. Basically, the report that's in front of you talks about preliminary spillway concrete testing. Because the next step for council, if the decision was made to preserve the housing, is it being rehabilitated or is it being replaced? And that is entirely or primarily dependent on the condition of the concrete. And that's been a contentious issue. And open for some debate over a number of years. Basically, the original thought was this was going to be $8,000 to $10,000 kind of range to do some preliminary testing through KGS, the same people looking for it. They've come back now, and if we were to do a full reconstruction, the number's not even in here because I went back to them and said, let's take a step back. They said they would require at least $47,000 worth of testing to allow them to check all the spillways, to get into the foundations, and to make sure that you weren't putting good concrete over bad concrete. But in order for council to be able to make a quicker decision, we got a couple options. And in going back to them, they said, okay, well, we think we could give you some fairly good guidance to move forward for about 22,000. And that's where you see this number in the recommendation. So that's quite a bit more extensive drilling and coring in each of the spillways to make sure they didn't get into any anomalies. The reason for that is, they did the coring on the top of the bridge and saw concrete that was very consistent with the report that was put together by B.M. Ross and Atkins and Davies back in '83. This is a report that was provided in an earlier as part of the information package. And basically in there, the report, which was dated May 10th, 1984, it's in front of everybody. It said the samples consisted of lenses of concrete separated by dirt seams. Mr. Davies reported that the result is that the concrete has a compressive strength, which is so low that it is effectively zero. This condition applies to both the weir, spillway, pier, and abutment substructures, as well as the deck superstructure. Because of the large number of voids and discontinued continuities in the concrete, ultrasonic testing is not even attempted as any readings would be. So if the question comes up as to why KGS seems so cautious now, they're looking at what they've seen in the data and what was found in 1983-84. So that being said, and just to qualify that, council has the option to order some preliminary testing at the 22,000. If that concrete looks good, then we could continue down the rehabilitation path. If the concrete fails right away, then basically that makes the decision a little more straightforward. Now you're either removal or replacement. And in the case of either replacement or rehabilitation, they would set off certain processes. So now we go back into the EA, we procure engineering services, we go back into the EA, and we start looking for funding sources, and there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting basically associated with both of them. Now, the one concern, perhaps the one suggestion, is that in talking to some experts in the field, I talked to an engineering firm that's very well acquainted in this, and asked the question, if we were looking at replacement, can this be looked at from a phased approach? And the answer is yes. Is it possible that there'd be additional costs? Yes, because you're not combining, you're not bringing the same contractor in to remove and replace. But what that would do, if council considered that option, if council was looking at the replacement or rehabilitation and rehab was out, then I would suggest that reconstruction could involve these phases that would allow us to eliminate the existing risk while we were preparing, for the next phase, which would be the replacement. So a lot of decisions. One of the reasons why it seems like this is really at the front of the table now is first off, I think we firmly believe that we're at the point where action is warranted. I've had to close the bridge because structural engineers have concern. It's time. basically though, staff is already preparing for the 2019 budget process. And if council's able to give us direction, we can start, I can start working with Dawn in Treasury. We can look at funding, we can start piecing together what the various phases look like and how we might approach it. So there's a lot of work that has to start, or that has to be done, but we really can't, we're not in a position to do much until we're given some direction. So basically, in closing, just to walk through the recommendations. If it was the desire of council to look tonight at the options of rehab or reconstruction, the reason the recommendations were put in here the way they were is, again, we really need to know more about the concrete. We suspect, I don't think I'm going to be too surprised based on the report that I've seen and some of the information. But we need to know more about that to help navigate and bring reports forward that would help council navigate the rest of the decision.
Okay, right.
So Sean, so the first step would be to do this core sampling, then is what you're saying, 22,000, right?
If we're looking at rehab or reconstruction, then we need to know what that concrete condition is.
And my other question was, this 22,000, when I saw that was going to be my question before. That was not included in the contract before to do that?
No, sorry, through you. There was some core sampling included. They certainly couldn't access what was down below. So they did core sampling on the bridge upper deck in lieu of. That being said, this 22,000 work is a lot more extensive. They're going to do, they're specifically looking at coring each of the spillways. Now the price is higher than I expected because they have concerns from an engineering perspective. They want to make sure that they're confident in what they're doing.
I guess the part I'm having trouble was that there was some of it they couldn't do, so are we getting money back because they couldn't do it?
No, what they did is they went up to the upper deck as well, and they went in from a different approach to try to get a sense of the concrete. It wasn't optimal by any stretch of the imagination, but it at least triggered a response. Now, they were very quick to point out that if they got down there and they started working in spillway number 1 and concrete fails, stop. So if they get in and everything's looking good, they keep going until they've either completed their program or they've gotten into an area that provides areas of concern. So it could be if they got in and tried to run the first set of cores and it came in bad, he already told them that's not right.
Councillor Syed?
The one question that I have is that, so we've got a report in 1984. It says 9 samples were done and the concrete wasn't very good then. What has been done to that dam since 1984? So if the answer is nothing, why would we spend $22,000 to hear the same answer again? Or worse. So it almost sounds to me that we would be throwing money at something that we already know is now a full replacement or removal. Forget the rehab. But if the 22,000 was to secure our understanding that the sample in 1984 wasn't wrong, I would have an argument there, because now if the concrete comes back fine in 2018, my issue would be with either the engineering company that did the sample now or the engineering company that did the sample in 1984. We haven't done any work to it. So I just don't want to continue. I was the big proponent of, we want to make sure we have all the information. And we want to make sure that we're taking into consideration that the structure is sound to do whatever we need to do to it, because there's no sense putting money into it and then 2 years down the road it falls. That was my whole point all along, regardless of what the answer is. So I guess I don't understand the $22,000 and it's not you, Sean. I guess it's the question is why are we doing more core sampling when we got a report that says it was already done and we haven't done anything to correct that in 1984? So in my mind, if the answer is we're doing it because we want to spend money, I'm saying don't spend the money. Now we've decided, because of what we've read here in this report, is now it's a replacement or removal, and figure out how we're going to finance that if the decision of the council is to continue to have it on the books. I just don't see us spending $22,000 to know something we already know.
Other councillors have thoughts on that? Deputy Reeve.
Well, when you start looking at the amortization figures, I really feel bad of putting another $150,000, $155,000 the first year, onto a new council that they have to keep making up for the next 30 years. That's a lot of money. And when I campaigned in 2014, there wasn't anybody, and I campaigned almost all the residents in East Wellmarsh Ward, that was in favor of keeping the dam, because they didn't want the payments. And we're saddling the council with a pretty big figure here if we move ahead.
Councillor Syke.
One thing I do want to note, though, is the figures you put in here, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, those figures are 30% based on the plus or minus that KGS gave us, 30% too high or 50% too low, or vice versa. That is correct? It's based on the figures that they gave us.
Yes, that's correct.
So the number is based on a number that the engineering firm has given us, but it could be 50% too high or 30% too low. We don't really know. So, it's fine to have the information, understand what that figure is from a replacement figure, but it's misleading a little bit until you get to the point where you're going to decide and you're going to contract it out, because then it could be less or it could be more. We have no idea. So I just wanted to make that comment, because sometimes we lose that note when we just put figures on it from what an engineer gives us.
Sean.
Thank you, Reeve. One other point that is mentioned in the report, and I think it's ever so critical to bring it up, is that's the amortization number. But unless we want history to repeat itself, there's the whole piece of investing into our infrastructure. So, and whether we're talking about a dam or a road or whatever, the number that was used was 1%, but they're saying no matter what we do, if it was council's desire and we built a new dam, there's of course the payment schedule that needs to be dealt with, but this is a valuable lesson, I think, to all of us about deferred maintenance and that whole piece. So, that piece has to be considered right up front, is that if we're building something new, we've got to invest in it.
Councillor Ritzman.
I agree with Trevor. I think spending that $22,000 on something that we already know probably isn't going to let us rehabilitate the dam doesn't make sense. And like Sean mentioned, it's fine to build a new one, but then you also have to maintain it long term. And is that something that we as a municipality are able to do long term? Quite honestly, I'd rather take that money and invest in our roads and our sewers and our water, as opposed to into a dam.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the phasing at all, or not at this time?
In the simplest terms, if council was going to go down that path, we would actually have to come back with a detailed report on what that might look like. But I say phasing simply because I think that if rehabilitation is not on the table, then we have to deal with the liability that we have there now. So the general thinking is that you start working on the removal piece while you're putting together the funding portions, the planning, all the engineering that's associated with the other side. And there's certain shared resources. Even if you were talking about removal in preparation for replacement, you still definitely need the services of an engineering firm to navigate that whole process. So you go into that with the engineering firm understanding that you're looking at those options, and that becomes part of the process right out of the blocks.
Makes it a very expensive thing, because we take a look at how many points on a taxation bill that would be, and going through some of those 30-year things, and if we went ahead with that, we would probably be shortchanging roads and bridges. And another thing, that if something is done to rehabilitate or build new, we have to have an efficient way that we could get the logs out to let the water through, and that is something that we haven't had. That for last year, for the June 23rd, there was a number of the logs, but the water was too high before we knew what was happening, and we just couldn't remove them. I think that would have to be part of the engineering design, is a way of being able to get the logs out.
And I believe, Revens, that the KGS was adamant on that as well, that anything we would do moving forward would involve some degree of automation, or should involve some degree of automation.
Councillor Singh.
The one thing I do want to say though is in every conversation that I've had with the committee, they have been very adamant that they would like to do a fundraising campaign or whatever that looks like from their perspective. They're just needing understanding of what's the goal, what's the end number. I'm speaking what I'm hearing, so if there's people in the community that are here that I'm misrepresenting, I apologize. But so to me, it's really, what is that? And the conversation is that in any respect of replacement, removal would have to happen before replacement. So the conversation is, what's the timeline from a perspective of a fundraising timeline that would be required in order to understand what infrastructure we have financed, that we have to finance for, versus whether we have actual funding for already. So I guess I don't know that answer. I don't know if Sean has that answer at this point. The concern is I would like to have that. I understand that this is something that needs to happen. But I'd also like the community to have that sense, to know, are they willing to look at that number and say, yeah, we can support, obviously with council's blessing, to figure out how to come up with that type of money, and with Infrastructure Ontario to figure out what the balance of taxation and all that stuff needs to be. But if the committee's not supportive of the number for whatever reason, then council needs to look at a different direction in my mind. So I'd like to have that kind of sense from the committee as well, through the Director of Public Works, to understand what that commitment looks like and how long it looks like that is. Like, I think it's only fair to them, but it also is fair to us to understand. I don't think anybody would want to pay $22,000 to do camp sampling that we already know is going to come back to the same. So that tells me it's either removal or replacement, and replacement's got a big figure to it. But we've got a committee that really wants to keep it. So what does that look like from their perspective? So that's my question back to Sean, to go back to have some dialogue with the committee about what that looks like.
Deputy Reeve Campbell.
I have no problem going back to the committee, but it has to be a definite figure. Like, we can't say the committee's going to raise half the money and we as a taxpayer have to raise the other half of the money. Because it's, if they want it, they have to pay for it. They have to come up with that money. We can't start it until that money is raised. Because I overheard somebody from the committee say, if we can just get it started, the council has to finish it. And I can't go that way. I can't go that way.
You want to comment, Sean?
I could read, I know in conversation with the committee, the feeling is that there is perhaps, be it federal or provincial funds that could be available. There is the feeling that there may be opportunities for hydroelectric generation. So they may have some ideas with regard to fundraising that certainly haven't been explored at this point.
Well, I think this, if I may, brings a number of things forward, and that basically, I think it's taken that if we go by the 1983-84 core samples and the value they were, that I think we're probably looking at rebuilding if enough stuff could be done. But the thing of it is, we're sort of strapped as to how much money we can spend on something that isn't listed as a core service, such as roads and bridges. And whether it would take, if you have a comment, please go ahead.
I just agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Campbell that if the committee is adamant about rebuilding the dam, that's fine, but they must have all of the money there before it begins, because as a council, I agree with him. I do not think that it is fair to put that on the taxpayers when it is not a core infrastructure, when we could be putting that money towards roads or other things. And I would fully support them in rebuilding that if that's what they wanted, but they need to raise the money on their own. And I think that if it's something that community really wants, the money will be there, much like it has been with other things, like with the playground equipment up at the school, with redoing the town hall theater upstairs. The money will be there if the community feels it's vital and necessary. But they have to raise it themselves. It can't come from taxpayers.
Yeah. Does that give you something to work with, Sean? And that and the committee can definitely get back to you as to what their feelings are, and that I expect a number of them are probably the same, that they are ready to discount the previous engineer report from the 80s.
I mean, then, read then just for the benefit of council, in conversation with some members of the committee, last Friday, a week and a half ago, the suggestion was made that if we were not going to proceed with core sampling, which I had arranged to start as early as this Wednesday, if it was the will of the council, we would put the stop logs back in, bring the level up for the season, and from an operational perspective, we don't really have a concern with it from an engineering perspective. KGS didn't have a concern with it because of the type of load. It wasn't something that worried them. The only thing we'll have to do is try our best to be operationally ready should last June take place.
With 3 inches of rain within an hour, somebody has to be moving.
It's going to be very difficult to meet that particular type of a demand. If it's, unless council objects, I've got no concerns with putting a stop on it.
How does council feel? Is that the?
Yeah, I'm saying put the stop logs in as soon as we can. No course, not spending the 22,000 with core.
Okay.
But with that, Sean's gonna they're required for us.
Are you seconding?
Well,
And
do we have the motion, or I was gonna suggest a motion,
So
Richard's working on
okay? Well, before we first and second, we should maybe listen to the motion.
gotta make it first.
Motion.
Yes.
So something along the lines of that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby direct the Director of Public Works to engage in discussions with the Save the House and Dam and Pond Committee to determine funding options for the potential replacement of the house and dam and report back to Council, and further that staff are directed to place the stop logs into the dam as soon as possible.
Does that suit you, Ray?
And not proceed with the course.
Further that, for example, will not be considered.
You're content with that as a motion? Do I have a seconder? Councilor Sutton? Any further comments?
Just one.
Go ahead.
We still have the liability if we get high water of getting those stop logs, like those logs out.
Yes.
That's a big liability on our staff.
Yes.
Even if half the logs would look better than it does, I know that they want more logs in, but I'm looking at the liability of it.
Okay. Are we ready? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay. 6.4.4, municipal development and servicing guidelines. Keep you going, Sean.
Thank you. This is a very straightforward report. At the last council meeting, we went over those municipal servicing guidelines. And that report indicated that basically the implementation document would follow. I think the only remaining piece we had to work on, there was a couple of questions on verbiage surrounding insurance and street lighting. The document that's before council tonight is what we would consider to be a functional and finished product. It's extremely consistent with area municipalities, and it's certainly completely aligned with the road profiles that were approved by council at the last meeting. So this just kind of closes the loop.
Councillor Slate,
I'll move, but I do have a question.
Councillor Ritzman Dominguez seconds. Go ahead, Councillor Slate.
So, Sean, does this change if we were to get a request by developers, engineering to say, we want this, we don't want that? Like, is this gonna be a blanket response back to developers that says, here's our minimum maintenance? There's no discussion, no determination, here it is, this is what we are expecting. Or is there still going to be that discussion where, like you just had with the engineering for the development in Blythe, where there could be some discussion? I guess I want to just make sure I'm clear on, I know what we're trying to accomplish, but my question is, is this going to be a no discussion purposes later, and then that's what we're going for?
Through your, I'd love to say that it was a no discussions purpose, but it's actually a minimum standard. So we would provide this document as well as those cross sections to any proposed developer. There's going to be some cases where we say, you know what, sidewalk on both sides of the road, or there may be requirements above and beyond what is in that standard. So I can't very well say this is the cast in stone standard. This would be staff's recommendation as far as a minimum standard, but that does not stop a developer from going through the process we went through tonight. And as you saw, there was certain circumstances where, because of geotechnical implications or research that was done or some other circumstance, that there may be the opportunity to work a little bit. It's important to know, though, there are certain minimum standards that would be protected by this document.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, thank you, Sean. Moving to 6.81, IT services. Dan?
Thanks, Reed. So as council is aware, Richard, clerk manager of IT, has tendered his resignation. And that position requires two skill sets, one clerk skill sets and the other is IT skill sets. The likelihood of us filling the position as it currently exists is very unlikely. So as we previously discussed, I've agreed to assume the role of CAO clerk on an interim basis until future decisions can be made regarding the position. And for signing purposes, Barb Black has agreed to assume the role of deputy clerk. So we have two individuals. We have a minimum of at least two individuals in the office for that purpose. With respect to the IT, we don't have additional IT expertise within the municipality, so we reached out to two local providers and we received two proposals that are before council for consideration. The two providers are Continuit and Microwave Basics, both are reputable companies, and both have and know the municipal business. Continuit is a newer company. They're based out of Goderich, but they are established in the market. They do provide service to other municipalities. Continuous proposal includes a fixed monthly fee that would include all regular servicing and maintenance of the township servers and the workstations. We have 12 servers and 60 workstations. Their hourly rate for on-site visits is $65 an hour, which is lower than Microwave Basics, which was $89 to $99 an hour. So significant savings there. And they've also guaranteed on-site services in 4 hours or less. And the reason they can guarantee that is they have a technician who lives here in Wingham who can be here within a very timely manner. In addition to that, it's recommended that that the CAO be authorized to retain Richard to provide IT assistance on an as-needed basis. So between Continuit and with Richard's assistance, that would be our IT service that we would have available in the municipality. So recommendation is to authorize the reading clerk to pass bylaw 67 of 2017, and to further authorize the CAO to retain Richard to provide IT assistance on an as-needed basis. The monthly fee is $2,100 a month. Are there any questions?
Councillor Syed.
So just so I'm clear about it, continue it would be the first line of defense. And then if they are unable to do what we need because of the expertise of Richard in, like, for example, in policing or in the other avenue where legends or stuff that he's had significant involvement in, that's when we would contact Richard for services.
Yeah, we would contact Richard in terms of ensuring that it doesn't conflict with his new work schedule.
I'll make that a motion.
And Councillor Ritzman seconds it. I'm a little tied as to whether I should make comment, and I probably should leave the chair if I do make comment.
Just stay where you are. Go ahead and make the comment.
Okay. That in what has happened in IT at the county in the past 2 years, to have a system where we can digitally bring up bylaws in seconds or minutes, in comparison to sending 2 people for 2 days, go through boxes and boxes of files to pull it up. It's something that I really hope we have some IT from these 2 companies rather than computer or workstation repair. There is a big difference in having forward vision IT people as to what is possible, what savings in time and effort are possible, and that I hope we don't have to go back into whatever decision we're making right now if some of that isn't happening. That it's just a concern I have, and in dealing, it isn't through municipal, but through one of these companies. I know of a number of things where they're good at fixing computers, but as to forward thinking, not near as well. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Councillor Syed.
So yeah, so the ultimately question is the scope of this project surely just that when there's an issue with an IT with a computer, is that when we're calling, or are we asking them for their expertise and understanding what we can going forward? I do have to say, when some of the conversations that we've had with regards to the administration about the IT and the issues that we have had with information, some of the stuff that we've got, we actually brought in some expertise that had been dealing with that specific issue at the county. The question is, have we now bombarded them with so much other stuff that we can't get that on the agenda? So, and the use of the comment is because I believe it was Mandy that was when she was brought from the county on a succumb basis. She had that, she was doing that at the county. So the thought was that some of that work could start with her expertise and understanding about what that process looks like, But if we've now bombarded her with something else because we can't get that, we need to understand that. And I think the council needs to understand it because we were hoping with some of this integration of bringing people in with that expertise that some of these projects that had really no traction before, we were hoping they were going to get some traction. And I think the whole IT and the information that we try to get on a daily basis from a council or a staff perspective needs to start coming to the forefront, because the clerk responsibility is that exact is that you need to be able to provide the information in a fairly timely manner. Can't be hoping that we find it in a box somewhere. So I guess I think I understand where Reeve's point is. I think we maybe need to circle back from council's perspective and staff to say some of those items that are legislatively bound by the clerk, have we made any traction on some of those projects that we thought have had no traction before?
Yeah, so just in terms of, so Richard is better maybe to speak to it in terms of the technical aspects, but in terms of Laserfiche is a program that the county uses. There is a fee, $20,000, Richard?
I think when we looked at it, it was going to be for the number of licenses we needed initially about 15,000 for the first year.
We had that in the draft 2018 budget, but with municipal election this year, we removed it. So we can certainly consider putting that into the 2019 budget. That is the program that Mandy is familiar with that is used at the county level.
Yeah, I think for us, it's, we get sometimes, well, at least I do, we get lost on what programs have been taken out, what programs have been added,
Yep.
what jobs are people doing that we brought them into, we thought they were doing a certain thing, now they've been switched to do. It's somewhat understanding of what that looks like. And we just need to understand are we making progress on projects that, one, are legislative, so that we're not in an issue with the government or anything like that when it comes to that. And I don't think we are, but I want to make sure that, one, as a clerk, our staff is responsible to understand what they're legislative to make sure we have. And council needs to be clear that we need to give them resources in order to do that. So I think if we can have that as a report, and if it's going into the 19 budget or potentially, then so be it. I think that's where the Reeve, I think, is commenting on, and really from an IT perspective, if we're asking them as part of their scope to, as when they're looking at this stuff, provide knowledge of their environment, then I think we can only ask them to, when you're around, you're doing stuff, think about this as something that is not just, we're going to call you when we have a computer that's broken. We need your expertise on how to understand digitally where we are in the 21st century.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there any more discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay. Moving to 6.8.2, North Huron Community Improvement Background Report. Laura and Dwayne, whoever wants to lead off.
Hello again. So in your agenda tonight is the North Huron Community Improvement Background Report. So this was a report that I've been discussing with the Economic Development Committee and drafted to address the community improvement plan that's been proposed for North Huron. So a community improvement plan, also referred to as a CIP, it's a planning tool, which is why I'm involved, and may be used to stimulate investment and or new development in an identified area and passed by municipal bylaw. It does this through being able to provide financial incentives or grants to tenants or landowners within the project area that's been identified to assist them with doing improvements to their building property. So the sections in the CIP background report are the introduction and and the process. So a summary of the process is that the CIP will contain a list of detailed financial incentive programs and eligibility criteria for the applicants, and an overall recommended strategy on how to reach the goals that are identified in the CIP with regards to improving the area that you've selected. So the background report that I've written is the first step of this. Once council gives direction, which is the motion here tonight, to proceed with the CIP process, the rest would be undertaken with a lot of consultation. So consultation would be communication with municipal staff, the CIP review team, other stakeholders, including the Economic Development Committee, and as well as public members and the BIAs. There would be an open house to present the draft CIP, and as well have a public meeting. And then the project would end with council approving, hopefully, and adopting the final draft of the CIP. So the CIP study area includes the wards, includes Wingham and Blythe. So the entire wards of those were identified as the study area. And the CIP project area would include narrowing down from those entire study areas a specific contained area that would be selected to have the applicants eligible to apply for the CIP and access those financial incentives. So the reason these were chosen is that the settlement areas each contain the downtown core commercial areas, which have architectural features, historical buildings, and provide pedestrian access to the remainder of the wards. The background report also contains a brief history of the settlements of both Wingham and Blythe. And also in section 2, where the authority to establish this CIP comes from. So it comes from the Ontario Planning Act. Section 28 authorizes municipalities able to create and draft a CIP and select a project area and identify through bylaw, as well as decide what financial incentives they want to be able to give to the applicants and how the applicants must meet the eligibility criteria to access those financial resources. Also, there are policies in the North Huron official plan to provide guidance on the goals and objectives of CIP, including the criteria for deciding what areas should be part of the CIP. So part of the background report was the conducting of a SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So this included doing site visits to the downtown core commercial areas of Wingham and Blythe and identifying some of the strengths that they have, such as on-street parking, new paved accessible sidewalks, and features such as tactile paving, some buildings that already are held to a high standard of maintenance or recent improvements, some attractive streetscapes, as well as possible new lighting and zoning that allows flexibility for the uses in the existing buildings. Weaknesses would be buildings that are structurally different from each other, so a variety of heights, one-story building next to possibly or surrounded by two-story buildings, creating an inconsistent streetscape, a lack of crosswalks in downtown Blythe, things like that. And then the opportunities and threats are where there are areas that are able to be improved and would be ideally highlighted as potential goals when the CIP is being created. So the SWOT analysis allowed for a critical needs assessment, which are the key issues and opportunities that would have the most impact in revitalizing the downtown core areas. So these needs are improving the visual states of the existing buildings in the cores, improving accessibility, and a barrier-free pedestrian environment, and improving pedestrian safety. So as I mentioned, potential sidewalks or traffic calming measures or sight lines that could be improved. So ultimately, the analysis on this report is concluding from the study of all the areas of Wingham and Blythe. It's reduced to focusing on the main commercial streets. And so this would be the downtown section of Josephine and Queen Streets. And this is because these are considered the core commercial areas that provide a large visual impact as you move through the areas of Wingham and Blythe. So the motion before council tonight asks that you receive the background report written by myself and discuss with the Economic Development Committee, and give direction for the full CIP process to be undertaken and start the consultations with both members of the public, continue with the Economic Development Committee and the BIAs, and then move to assemble dates for the public meeting and the open house. And the motion for tonight.
Okay, Councilor Smith-Talinga moves. Deputy Reeve Campbell seconds. Questions or comments? You have anything you want to add, John? No. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Singh.
I did want to do, the only one comment I want to make is in essence, when the final report comes, this ultimately ensures that council is the expectation of councils between now and forever, that there's going to be some investment put in the budget to continue on this this improvement plan. So the reason for the request today is that OMAFRA and the government are providing $42,000 to start this plan. So that the only way to get that money is to have this plan adopted by council and reviewed through the process. Once there is no guarantee after that money is done that there's more money coming. So it would be under the understanding that council understands that there is going to be some money that needs to be put in the budget in order to keep this program running. And the intention of this program would be matching dollars. The committee would put money available, applicants would put money towards it, whatever the money would be a matching dollar for dollar, and then that would be what would have to come through. So I just want to make sure that was clear to the council, because it is a future outlooking thing that councils today and the next council is going to have to understand that in order to make this work, they're going to have to invest in the community, as I said.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor of the motion? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And 6.8.3, economic development, amended terms of reference. Dwayne, I'll let you elaborate on that.
Sure. So essentially, this is a follow through of a previous discussion we had regarding the terms of reference, whereby the Economic Development Committee reviewed and discussed what they viewed to be their mandate and their vision of their role. And they were of the opinion that there's some other areas, I won't get into a lot of detail, that they want to focus on marketing in terms of decisions around like ads and papers and things like that. The committee doesn't have an interest in making those sort of decisions. And as such, there was a motion passed by the committee recommending that those decisions get redirected along with the appropriate dollars to the recreation department. So as part of that, there are terms of reference for the Economic Development Committee. Those terms of reference do speak to marketing. So what this motion essentially is doing is amending those terms of reference for the Economic Development Committee, basically removing marketing, for lack of a better word, from the terms of reference, allocating that to the Recreation Department. That said, though, the Economic Development Committee does still have an interest in terms of, as the Recreation Department moves forward with, for example, the development of a marketing strategy, that the committee would still have a role in terms of, their input and their advice as far as how those dollars are being spent. But the decisions themselves would be left to the Recreation Department and would not always be coming back to the Economic Development Committee. I think that, unless there's any questions.
I'll move that.
Councillor Ritzman-Taninga and Councillor Syke. Any further questions? All in favor? Carried. 6.8.4, Melissa. This is North Huron Museum presentation.
Hello, everyone. Reed Vincent and Council. I'm Melissa Scott. I've worked for the Recreation Department for 17 years. Pat Newton was previously working on this project, and Dwayne has tasked me with moving it forward in her absence and in the interim. So I am going to start tonight's presentation by refreshing Council on the steps that have been taken so far on the North Huron Museum. So to start, at February 8th council budget meeting, council directed staff to discontinue museum programming and to close the building for 2018. The building has been closed and museum programming has been discontinued pending council's further information. So I just want to take you back to the flow chart that you've seen before, that has been in previous documents and previous presentations in front of council. So as I said, at the April 3rd council meeting, the decision to not renovate the existing North Huron Museum was made and for the building to remain closed for the balance of 2018. So as you can see, the yellow circle there, the left-hand side of the chart has been removed because we've decided not to renovate that building. So the purpose is just to assist council with the decision-making process. We're on the right, as I said. So now we need to make decisions about the museum programming. So we can move down a bit there. So at the April 3rd meeting, council directed the former Director of Recreation Facilities prepare a report outlining the steps moving forward for the artifacts, museum programming, and for the building itself. Tonight's presentation focuses on possible locations for a museum and for museum programming, as well as options to discontinue the program. And at the conclusion tonight, staff are seeking direction on where council wishes to proceed with this section. So to start with the building itself, so staff understands that decisions about the current building needs to be decided. However, this will not be part of tonight's discussion. So we know there are many decisions to be made regarding the building. There are things that need to be decided about. First off, is the building to be declared surplus for municipal needs? Is it to be sold, repurposed, or demolished? Does the heritage designation need to be removed, or does it need to be strengthened in order to keep it? In terms of the Alice Munro Garden, do we move it to a new location, or do we sever it from the museum property? And if it stays in its current location, how do we access the water to look after the garden if the building is sold? And also in terms of the electric car charging station, do we move it, or can we come to an agreement with a potential new owner? So we know all these questions are out there for council. We are, as I said, we are not going to be focusing on them this evening. From what I understand, at the April 3rd meeting, council made it clear that you wanted information regarding the future of the museum programming, the artifacts, and the archives first, and that the decision should be made quickly to move the project forward to assist our museum stakeholders with their decisions. So our friends of the museum, the Alice Munro Festival, Display and Garden, and for the Barn Dance Group to be able to make their steps going forward. Also, depending on staff resources, it will take 1 to 2 years to vacate the building. So for this reason, we felt the building could take a step back while we wait as we move into lame duck, and that a decision on the building is not an immediate need. We thought we would move forward on the programming side. So we will bring forward a program or a report on that going forward. Okay, so taking it into our tree here, so moving to a no location versus discontinuing the program. This is the decision we're looking to make this evening. If the program is to be moved to a new location, the options are to expand or downsize the program. Status quo is not an option, and staff understands council is not interested in continuing to invest in museum services unless the service can or will become an economic or tourist driver for the community. In all moving options, council needs to decide on the focus of the museum and then manage the collection to achieve this focus. If the council decides to discontinue the program, then decisions regarding the artifacts and archives need to be made. And in all options, a deaccessioning policy needs to be adopted by council to either divest or focus the collection of almost 12,000 items. So moving the program to a new location. So in order to move the program, there are many requirements the new museum facilities will require. So staff considered accessibility, public washroom, square footage requirements, storage requirements, the appropriate climate control for artifact and archive longevity. And we wanted it to be located in a standalone building or in a partnership with a multi-use facility where many people congregate. So somewhere close to the downtown core or someplace where a lot of people are going to come for another purpose that's going to bring them in. Okay, so I put up a chart here. We looked at 5 different properties. 2 of the properties, A and B, are growth options, and they are both options to buy. They are sitting, as you can see, between 12,500 square feet and 15,000 square feet at a price point of approximately $25,000 to $27,000 a year, or a price of $749,000 to $799,000. And then we have 3 options that range from 4,500 square feet to 1,440 square feet, where one is an option to buy and the other 2 are options to lease. All of them are on Main Street locations, and they are all accessible to the public. I'm going to go into these a little bit deeper. So just to look at the top 2. So as I said, options A and B, they range from 12,500 to 15,000 square feet. The building cost for this space is $26,000 to $27,500 per year. This is a mortgage payment for a 20-year term based on an approximate purchase price listed above. The utility costs for these spaces, based on forms that we received from the real estate, is approximately $14,000 per year. There's also an operating budget, which currently the Recreation and Facilities Department looks after cleaning, snow removal, insurance, inspections, etc. And that would be approximately $20,000 per year for a space approximately these sizes. And the total facility cost for a growth range option would range somewhere between $60,000 to $61,500 per year. In both of these cases, the space will require significant retrofitting and moving expenses. And space A will also require taxes to be paid to Morris Turnberry Township because it's not within North Huron. So downsizing the museum, which is option C, D, or E, as you can see above, I've listed them again. So option C to E range from 4,500 to 1,440 square feet. The building costs of these spaces range from a free partnership with a 5-year lease to $28,543 per year, 20-year mortgage. The utility cost is slightly less because there are smaller spaces to the tune of approximately $10,000 per year. And the facility's operating budget is also approximately $10,000 per year. And again, includes year-round cleaning, snow removal, insurance, and inspections. The total facility cost for a growth option ranges from $20,000 to $48,500 per year. And again, all spaces will require some significant retrofitting and moving expenses to move it from our current location to the new facility. So in the case of growth or downsize options, additional information will need to be gathered regarding retrofitting and moving costs, but we first wanted to make sure that council is interested in moving in this direction before we move that action. Okay, so as you notice, one option stands out from the rest on the charts we looked at previously. Option D, the Main Street Historic Building, the train station, has been offered to the Township of North Huron for a $0 lease agreement for a 5-year term by a philanthropic local business person on the condition the space is open to the public in a museum capacity. The municipality would be responsible for taxes, snow removal, landscape maintenance, and cleaning, as well as utility costs. This 3,000 square foot space has been completely restored on a 1-acre lot. It is wheelchair accessible and has gas, heat, and air conditioning to meet the museum's environmental requirements, as well as the requirements for all the archives and the collection itself. The property is located on the main street and has ample parking. This generous offer, along with the building's design and location, lends itself well to not only a museum, but a cultural and visitor center for the community. So, if this option is of interest to council, staff suggests the services provided from this building could be expanded to include tourist information and being fiscally responsible, and an existing employee from another location within the municipality could staff this building to decrease costs of running the center. The existing staff member would run the facility year-round, Monday through Friday, and for the busier tourist season, we would be able to bring in a student to expand the hours into the evenings and weekends, and also to accommodate special events. Funding for students, up to 70% percent of their wage is available to be subsidized. When we spoke to Elizabeth French Gibson, she said students who are not supported by a full-time staff member are very rarely accepted. So that would be easier to procure for us when there is a full-time staff member there to be able to supervise that staff, that summer staff. So with this option, we would get the best of both worlds. Previously, the municipality was paying for a space 12 months of the year and only receiving 3 months of service. Here we would get 12 months of service with a strong summer focus. This building option also opens up the possibility for other partnerships with the Wingham BIA, the theater, schools, county funding, Huron Heritage Fund, etc. Partnerships the community has been asking for. The site also allows for additions to be constructed should demand be warranted because it is on a 1 acre lot. It does have some space there. Now, again, to recap what we discussed at the previous council meeting, at the April 3rd meeting, Elizabeth French Gibson, the senior curator for the Huron County Museum and Jail, spoke to the council to give context on what is required to run a successful museum program and how to make it an economic driver and what would we need to ramp up our museum to get us to that level of programming. So to refresh, a museum should be participatory in order to engage our community in preserving, sharing, and celebrating our culture through events, storytelling, exhibitions, evaluations, and programs. And museums need to have strategic plans, identity, vision, and branding, accessibility, partnerships, and community connections. It also needs to have diversity and inclusion and cooperation and coordination within the community. So current status and future plans. The North Huron Museum has fallen short in programming with a seasonal static display of artifacts, and due to the low number of visitors, the impact on tourism and economic development has been minimal. As stated in previous reports, there was only 300 visitors last year. So in order to become more impactful, a program needs to be developed that involves interaction, membership, rotation of exhibits, and special events. Staff are suggesting some static displays would of course be developed focusing on core North Huron elements such as the CCANX contingent or an Alice Munro display, for example, with quarterly collection transitions to maintain interest and draw a target audience and repeat visitors. So some examples Elizabeth gave was for September to December, they would focus on Remembrance Day, local heroes, things of that nature. January to March would be items of strong local interest, as this is the time when the older adult community supports local museum as travel becomes difficult due to poor weather. And April to June is a time to focus on school visits and interactive displays. And in the summer, it's a time for a more wide-reaching focus to bring people in from out of town to allow our tourists to be drawn into the community. We feel multi-use facility is important to attract visitors to our museum. The Strathroy Caradoc Museum is considered a small museum, and Pat had spoke of that previously. It's an equivalent status to our museum. It's very active and engaging in its community, and in 2017 it had over 18,000 visitors compared to our 300. Its success is due to its commitment to programming, but it also has the benefit of being in a multi-purpose facility. So it's linked with their library and is tied with an art gallery as well. So in the train station proposal, we are linking tourism information to an improved museum program to assist in drawing visitors into the space. However, staffing resources must be allocated in order to achieve these objectives. So a passionate staff person with summer personnel will also drive volunteer engagement, build excitement, and garner support from the community and its businesses. And as we said, we could be achieving this with current staff by just moving their location. So focusing the collection. So in order to move to a new location, the collection requires focusing. So modern museums have policies on interpretation, community, exhibition, collections mandate, deaccessioning, and strategic plans. A one-year contract staff person will be required to move and focus the collection into a new space. So this is above and beyond what we would look for to run the museum. So the deaccessioning policy is important to polish the collection into telling the North Huron story effectively. It also allows control of the volume, storage, and content of our collection. We currently have a 9,550 square foot space that would need to be condensed into a 3,000 square foot space. Something that's also at the forefront of most museums is their storage needs. As the museum collection is focused into the new space, the current building is emptied, some materials will need to be kept. The storage required for these materials will go beyond what is available at the train station. There is a second floor that would not be accessible to visitors. It's safe, it's just not accessible with elevators or ramps, that type of thing. So we would have space upstairs for some storage, but not for all. The Wingham Police Service is being transitioned to OPP. At some point, the Wingham Police Service will be vacating the old Armories building, and this may meet the storage needs that we need for the museum as well as other things within the municipality. Okay, so discontinuing the program. So if we go back up to the beginning of the presentation, there was a decision tree which was, will the North Huron Museum program move to a new location, or will the program be discontinued? So we've given the information on moving, so now we need to go down the other side, so discontinuing the program. If the decision is to discontinue the program, there is a full intention to still pay each artifact the respect that it deserves. A deaccessioning policy will be required to discontinue the program and disperse the collection to other communities in the province or in the county. So we are required to follow a municipal approved policy guideline. Any policy to deal with deaccessioning the collection needs to be brought to council before it can be implemented. Donated artifacts become part of the public collection, and items identified as on loan would be returned to their identified owners. Items that have been donated are part of the public collection and would need to follow a deaccessioning policy. These policies give artifacts the respect they deserve, and by moving to other locations or by creating space for them, the artifacts would be allowed to flourish in other locations, so places where other people can continue to see them. So dispersing the collection. So if the choice is to disperse the collection, there's still a large undertaking to be realized. As with moving to a new location, a one-year contract staff person would be required to move and disperse of the collection. So this would happen in either direction. We would need someone to actually go through, create the policies, and to deaccession the over 12,000 artifacts. It's going to be a significant task, whether you're focusing it into a new program or whether you're removing them and sending them throughout the province. Archives would also be included in the deaccessioning policy. Once this process is complete, the steps required to repurpose or divest of the building can be completed. As stated in previous reports, there would be a potential cost savings of approximately $30,000 annually on the municipal budgets beginning in 2020 if we were to deaccession the artifacts and just discontinue the program altogether. So in conclusion, council's next decision is to decide the plan for the North Huron Museum programming. So if we're going to move the program, is the proposal a joint museum and tourist center put forth amenable to council? Any options under moving the museum require some financial investment to move the program and artifacts and continue operations. Storage and displays will need to be updated, policies will require development, and relocation expenses will be incurred. Some of these costs will be one-time only, but ongoing building and some staffing costs will be required, which is what we indicated above. And there's also the opportunity for partnerships. If we discontinue the program, there's a significant cost to this process as well. However, it will be a one-time cost, and by 2020, there will be no further outlays for the museum program. Okay. So I'll open the floor to council.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. That's quite a few topics or points to consider. So Councillor Simon.
So to be fair, I think the conversation from me and really I take this for more for Councillor Vodden's perspective is I think the museum has its needs, and it has its needs in the fact that the municipality has shortchanged it for many years on resources, programming, all of which we've known about for quite some time, but obviously priorities have seen money go elsewhere. The concern that I have with moving believe me, the tourism aspect in the building, I think, is a great location. Tourism aspect, I think, is a much needed for the entire municipality, not only just in not only in Wingham, but for the entire municipality. To be quite honest with you, but what I'm concerned about is training. The fact that we're going to put a person in there who's coming from rec. Are they going to have any more value from the museum perspective and understanding of the needs of the museum unless we physically provide resources to them to go get that training in order to support them? You know, the fact of the matter is, Councillor Vaughn's been very adamant that we haven't provided that in the past. So if council's not willing to provide it today with the movement of people into that position, with longer hours and more accessibility. Accessibility is great, but that's not the concern we've had. The concern we've had is not being able to meet the needs of what a museum needs based on what the Huron County creator has mentioned. So if putting somebody in that building and having it open isn't going to change our dilemma on the fact that we're going to get 300 or 400 visitors. We need it to be something that it's not today. And if staff can show that thought has been out there and council has thought that maybe that resources is available to give somebody an idea of some training with the county or whatever the case may be, then I would fully support that. But until I hear that, I can't really support something because I think all we're doing is we're moving it from one building to another building. And yes, it's a great lease, the fact that we don't have to pay for it, but we're not giving it its just due. And in 5 years, we're going to be talking about the same thing.
Okay, if council will permit me, again, I'll make comments. Melissa mentioned Strathroy Caradoc. I am a good friend of both the mayor and the CAO, who is a former North Huron councillor, that we maybe need to do a little bit more as to, okay, what all is Strathroy doing to be as successful as they are in drawing people in. And I know the museum staff from the county are definitely wanting to work with us as much as they can. They would love to see a successful museum having more visitors, and that there's maybe that extra little piece that we need, and we definitely need to take advice on what we would be deaccessioning. And it's said as to where we would be deaccessioning. And for archives, if we're talking about storage, the county is moving to renting archival storage, and that is at a very reasonable rate for archives that we don't require on site all the time, but that we need to keep a record of. That's just some points that I wanted to bring forward as a background as to where we might move, and that, as you said, Melissa, there's a lot of points in this, and we just have to stir the points around to get a mix that we can make work. Councillor Ritzman.
I think it's valuable to look at moving the museum to a new location and looking at some different ways to do some programming, some more innovative things, and researching what other museums of this size are doing. It may work for us, it may not work for us, but if we don't look into it to try and see, then we won't know, and then we've lost something that has some really great potential. I know that there's a number of community organizations that have a lot of ties to the museum, and it would be sad to see that not accessible to the public anymore, and to those people who come specifically to see certain things that we have to offer here. The Wingham BIA is looking at a branding program right now to see if we can brand Wingham as something interesting, and we need to have that museum available so that we can really work with that branding and draw more people to our community.
Ray,
I think as far as moving, wherever we're moving and whatever we're gonna do, if we're gonna have a museum open, it's inevitable that we gotta train somebody. Well, that's important right off the start. And as you said, gather information as to why these museums are successful.
Councillor Site?
So I guess what I'm hearing is we're willing to review to look at whether moving is the option. But my idea, my thinking is that we make sure that staff is understanding that they need to provide the budget accordingly. Like we can't be doing this on the same level of budget that we've been doing it in the past, because that's just going to provide the same issues we've had. If training is going to be a concern or an issue, then we need to be able to know that it's in the budget and that it's going to get done, so that the programming aspect of this is going to move forward. And we're not the next council is not talking about this in a year or a year and a half from now, and we're going, well, what happened to the programming? So I think we have to be very clear to staff that if we're going to move and we're going to look at the programming, the staff needs to provide the budget accordingly, and we got to leave it alone.
Melissa?
When we met with the local business person, that was part of their outlay for allowing us to use the space, that we wouldn't be able to say, we're only going to open 2 days a week or that type of thing. That would be part of the lease, so that if future councils decided we're going to cut costs by moving it back, as I said, 1 or 2 days a week, we would then be breaking our lease. So he would be putting that within the lease agreement. He also wanted to make it understood that even though it is a 5-year lease, there would be an option for a 10-year extension, or even a donation to the township moving further on, as long as it's being used for the purpose in which it was intended, either community development, tourism, or a museum program. So it's a short-term option on paper today, but it does have long-term availability to the community.
Councillor Site?
So I will move acceptance of the report provided by Melissa Scott, and I will look for a report on movement of the museum to the train station with a report on what the programming and resources and costs associated to that look like.
Okay. Councillor Howard, seconding? Okay. That gives you marching orders? Okay, thank you. All in favor of the motion? Thank you. Carried. Moving to correspondence. And 7.1. We have received a written resignation from Councillor Mott, and that there is a suggested motion that Council of the Township of North Huron hereby accept with regret the resignation of Councillor William Knott, effective June 28th, 2018. Do I have a mover? Councillor Ritzman-Tenenga, Deputy Reeve Campbell, all in favor? Carried. Okay. Then 7.2. I received a request letter from Bell Canada for a letter regarding 3.5 gigahertz spectrum allocation. And that I will go into a little bit of background. I believe I was almost the only one, if not the only one, at County Council that received this request. Roger Watt, that sits beside me at County Council, that handles the broadband, internet, all things technical, and that he is very knowledgeable in that field, said, by all means, support this. It's something that Bell, Rogers, and TELUS would be the major users, but for areas that don't have fiber optic cable, this would really give a lot more use and basically people being able to have at least satisfactory internet connection than we already have. So that there was a template of a letter that was sent. We have that filled out. If council decides to make the recommendation that I sign the letter and send it back, it has to be back day after tomorrow. So that that's a little bit of the background. Is there any more questions or?
On with it.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, we will go back to 7.1 for a minute and talk about a little bit of where that puts us. I think it's 22 days short of the period where we would not have to fill that position to finish out the year. That if you're within 90 days of an election, that you don't have to fill a councillor resignation. But being as that's just a little longer, we would have to do it. There is no regulation as to how we have to do it, and that I was hoping that it would maybe be done as a notice of motion that we contact a person from the Blythe ward that would be willing to fill in that end of term, and that I have contacted one person and he is conditionally agreed, a person that all this council is aware of with extensive municipal experience. He was not wanting his name brought forward at this time. He definitely is not going to be a candidate in this fall's election, so that would avoid the impression of giving anybody a step up in a campaign to represent the Blythe ward. So
Stafford, just a conjecture as to how council wishes to proceed with the filling of that vacancy. We do have to fill the vacancy.
but we do, Richard, do you want to go through some of the things we have to do from the clerk's position? Or that Richard has told me that we fill the position as a majority of council, that we do not have to advertise it, we do not have to run an election or anything that is going to cost us extra money. If that's correct, Richard?
That's correct. So in terms of filling the position, it's just by vote of council as to who you wish to appoint. So they're appointed. You don't need to necessarily run a by-election or that sort of thing. So if there's someone that council has in mind that you agree on, that you wish to appoint and they accept, then that's all that's required there.
Okay, James.
So how do we go about to appoint this person who we think would like to do this for us without putting a name on it for her?
Well, what I was thinking was if we notice a motion to contact this person, that it would be debated on the ramifications, and it could be done as simply as a motion at the next council meeting to bring the names, the person's name forward to accept the position. I will, in the in-camera portion, reveal the name to council, but he did not want his name revealed right as yet. That he is willing to help us out to finish it out. And I think it will be self-explanatory as soon as council members know the person's name. Right.
So we don't have to do anything more in our council meeting now, it's going to be
Well,
a camera.
If a notice of motion,
Just
bring a
notice of
motion forward to do a council appointment.
Okay.
Okay.
I just agree with one other thing. We do have a couple of matters with respect to former Councillor Knott was one of our representatives on the Blythe Landfill Board. And we are currently in discussions, negotiations regarding our CAS, our contamination zones. We are at a point now where we need to call a board meeting to seek further direction. So fortunately, because of timing, looking for council's consideration of the appointment of Councillor Knott's replacement to that board. So we can move forward with scheduling a meeting.
That I have followed up for years on that, and for the first portion that I was one of the members representing North Huron on that. I'll let council take that, that I would be willing to take that committee appointment if council wanted me to.
I'll make a motion.
And Ray seconds. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion? Carried, thank you. That's got it?
Yep.
Okay.
Just a minute, if we don't make a notice of motion now for the next council meeting, we would have to wait till the next meeting after that. So if I can say I'm gonna bring a motion for the next council meeting, fill the position of council, Is that how we word it?
Jim?
Yeah, so the notice of motion process is normally, it would be on one agenda. The
It
motion
has to be
as,
on tonight in order to go into next council meeting.
if you were going to make, so we would need to have the notice of motion. And being as it wasn't on this agenda, it would be in the minutes, but it's not actually on this agenda. So technically it would be on the next agenda, the notice of motion, then yeah, it would be considered at the following meeting after that.
That would work with what I believe would be copacetic.
Yeah. Another option, not necessarily the council wants to do this, you could advertise. That individual that's interested could apply. And council could consider applications and make an appointment at the next council meeting. That's another option.
Which costs money.
It does cost money, correct?
Councilor Site.
I understand it costs money. I just, I have this anking thing of, I know you say we're gonna find out the name and that might be fine. However, what strikes me as odd though is that the rest of the community hasn't had an opportunity if they have an interest in doing it. So I understand we went and selected an individual in Goliath. Question is that is there other people in Goliath that have the same interest? And by hand selecting somebody, potentially, are we setting ourselves up for a, well, why was that person selected, not a review? So I just, for the $200 or whatever it is and you don't have to advertise online. You don't have to advertise in the paper. Advertise on our website. That's free. And say, no applicants are required to provide by Friday with the ability to review them at next council meeting and appoint somebody at 10. I just don't, I just, in my head, I just don't like the fact that the council's appointing somebody because you've left the rest of the ratepayers in that ward to not know why they have been selected or why that person's been selected and not but anybody else has had a chance. So that's my only part. I will let council decide. That's my comment to the purpose. I think to me, having an open thing for the notice of motion thing is gonna cause us 3 weeks anyways. If we did a week of putting it on our website and we could have somebody at the next council meeting appointed. And we'd be no worse off. And we've had open discussion about everybody.
And it's just a more transparent process. I agree with what Trevor says. I think we need to let people apply for it. It needs to be fair and open.
Okay, just the one question, criteria for choice. If more people apply.
What's the criteria for choice for any employment? The same criteria applies for every employment from the municipality. In this particular case, because we're not having an election, there's no choice when we're elected. We're just elected. But the fact that we're hiring an individual for a term, I find that the selection process is the same as any other hire.
The last time we did this, they had to send an essay that we had to read. And that's what and they were interviewed on that essay. And that's how we have filled positions before. Not necessarily anyone that was going to run in the next election, just for the rest of that term of the election. I think that's been done twice.
Go ahead.
So my thing is that when we ask them to apply, it's not they're applying with their name and their address. They have to provide a resume that no different than us. We have to provide the resume to their constituents when we go to elect, when we go to run. They want to know what our experience is and where we stand and what we do. They should have to do the same thing to us via a resume to understand what their municipal experience is. Like that's an open and transparent process.
That's still a 3 week period before that's done.
It is no more longer than waiting the notice of motion.
Carry on, let's get on. Wasting time.
Okay. So Lori's activity report with a number of the changes. There's been a number of things that I've been working on in the background, and that I think I'll probably leave it there because there's a number of things that are going on, and we will have an extensive in-camera session. That there's a bunch of time that I've spent working on those issues. So if any council members have reports on committees or meetings that they have attended on behalf of council, Councillor Syke.
I just wanted to bring a short update on the Building Bridges project. They have had substantial work with regards to where they are in their full program. So obviously, from what we know, the playground is finished. So the playground has been finished and that has been complete. The learning grounds has one little small piece of the garden left to do. Money has been raised. They're just waiting for somebody to drop blueprints to finalize that perspective. And then lastly is the lower field at the high school, which is hoped to be completed by this summer. They have $27,000 in the bank to build the field house, which the high school is going to be doing. But then they don't have a quote on the building yet in order to provide that. The next thing is the upper field at the high school. That's the one that is the last piece that the committee will have left to complete the fundraise for. So they're hoping that potentially that would be required maybe one more gala celebration. They're still waiting for a quote to understand what that looks like. But the school did not want it done until the summer of 2019. So they'll be still working through that process to do that. So there's been lots of discussion, but I would say to them, in my mind, I thank the committee from no shape from myself, other than the odd communication, the odd ticket fundraising that I've been doing for them. They've been gone on this alone through the last year and a half with very limited meetings, more structured meetings, purposes. And really, the one thing is that the project is a long one, but it's been gratifying for them to see that they've actually been finished probably almost 80 or 85% of the project that they set out to go. So I did want to bring that up to the council so that we have had asked them to come, but because of the higher priority of stuff on our agendas, they've instructed me to provide this update to council, and if there was any questions or from that, they want something to come from that committee to council, they would be more than happy to provide something more formal, but they thought that information would be suffice to council at this point.
Okay, thank you. Any requests by members? Okay. Point 9 is notice of motion. Does anybody want to make one or not? Okay, point 10, we're moving into bylaws. So that bylaw number 63, 2018.
That bylaw number 63, 2018, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 39, 2012, a bylaw to provide for the regulation and control of traffic on the highways for the Township of North Huron be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reading clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Councillor Seight, Deputy Reeve Campbell, all in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 64, 2018.
That bylaw number 64, 2018, being a bylaw to appoint a chief administrative officer / clerk for the Township of North Huron, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reading clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Councillor Hallahan, Deputy Reeve Campbell, all in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 65, 2018.
That bylaw number 65, 2018, being a bylaw to appoint a deputy clerk for the Township of North Huron, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reading clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Deputy Reeve Campbell and Councillor Ritzman Taninga, all in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 66, 2018.
That bylaw number 66, 2018, being a bylaw to establish an economic development committee as a committee of council for the Township of North Huron and to adopt terms of reference for the economic development committee, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reading clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Councillor Seight, Councillor Ritzman Taninga, all in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 67, 2018.
That bylaw number 67, 2018, being a bylaw to authorize the reading clerk to sign on behalf of council an agreement between the Township of North Huron and Continuate Corp for IT services, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reading clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Councillor Ritzman Taninga, Councillor Hallahan, all in favor? Carried. Okay. To number 13, closed session and reporting out. Do I have a motion to go in camera? Deputy Reeve and Councillor Ritzman Taninga, all in favor? Here, we'll read this. The reasons we're going in camera is section 239 2B, personnel matters of an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employee, building / bylaw enforcement personnel. Also, section 239 2C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. It is a Blythe property. Section 239 2B, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employee, and section 239 2D, labor relations or employee negotiations, recreation personnel. Also, section 239 2B, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employee, fire department personnel. We will have a short recess now. Oh, I didn't call you that. Going in camera. All in favor? Carried. We'll have short recess now.